have you seen, or how do you see racism and sexism intertwined?
Okay. I'd say, I say, like black women in particularly, are really. I mean, just specifically in like the black community. This is excluding other minorities of like Hispanics and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, because they're also experience these type of things. But like black women are at a significant disadvantage compared to black men, and that's just like black men and women are worse off than white men and white women, and so it goes white men, white women, black men, and then it's a very stark drop off to black women, and so there's a lot of like, sexism in that, and on top of the already the racial barrier that they have, and so that's like one way I would say that they kind of come together.
Do you think there's any ways, especially like with your sister, how you've seen racism affect her differently because she's a woman?
Yeah, I'd say more so. I think it's not necessarily like conscious decisions that or conscious things that she notices, but it's sometimes I know that people will be very quick to just call her bossy, and she has a very strong personality. That's very true, but she like people are very quick to anytime she says something that's um, something that's like kind of like against the grain a little bit, people are very quick to hop on her and be like, well, you're just being bossy, you're just being stereotypical black woman with full of attitude, that kind of thing. And so I think, or she'll do things like, for a long time she hated her natural hair. She hated her hair was curly. She hated the way that it looked, and so she was always trying to straighten it, always trying to do things to make it look like a white person's hair. And so I think that's a pretty good example of how it affects her differently than I do,
Mm-hmm.
than it does to me.
Um, what do you think? Like some of the hardest. This is almost a paradoxical question, but what are some like one of the hardest things to explain with racism to
No,
me who
no,
has no experience in anything except for not having a soul?
no. You're good. You're good. I think it's probably the it's it's a feeling of isolation that you don't really understand until you experience it, and it's one of the things that I think will forever be like a will forever be kind of a barrier between white people and black people until I mean I don't know for the very foreseeable future, just because you can explain isolation. You can take a white person and you could move them from the U.S. into, I don't know, Hong Kong, and you could be like, hey, you have to live in Hong Kong for a month. That experience for them is not even remotely close to how that's about as close as I could feel like you could get to. You would have to take a person to explain it to someone to get that feeling. Would be to take them from a very similar culture and drop them into a very different culture, a language they don't know. But even then, it's hard because they'll still be treated well. As a white person, it's. I'm not gonna say it's an ultimate luxury, but like a lot of times it is, where you're gonna get a higher like standard of treatment for a lot of things, regardless of where you go, and so you can take that person and put them in Hong Kong, but they're not going to have the same experience as a black person in a room alone with a bunch of white people, just because the black person is going to experience a lot harder thing. Like they already have an entire system that comes against them a lot of times, a lot of prejudices against them, whereas a white person probably won't have that going to a very different culture. They'll be kind of like looked up to, and so that's probably the thing that's hardest to explain is the feeling of everything being kind of stacked against you, and the feeling that it won't get better, that you're stuck there, that you're isolated. So I think that's probably the hardest thing to explain, because it's like I said, it's not really something you can explain. Not really something you can understand unless you actually experience it. So it just takes a lot of empathy.